Hey good people, and welcome back to the channel. So I just finished watching episode 8 of Married at First Sight Nashville, and I'm going to give my rating up front. On a scale of 1 to 10, I will give this episode 8 a solid 2. I was this close to giving it a 1, but I'm in a generous mood today. Now in a few moments, I'll be giving you all my episode breakdown, followed by my thoughts on each of the couples, and you fine folks will truly understand why I rated this episode a 2. And just to give a heads up, I won't be talking about any of the after party stuff that's shown during the last 30 minutes of the episode, because watching the first hour and a half was torture enough. But before we go any further, on yesterday, I posted an unpopular opinion video for why I believe Kirsten and Airris should have gotten married on the show, and why they would have had a long-lasting marriage if they were matched. So be sure to check out that video if you haven't already. And without any further delay, let's jump into this review. Episode 8 of Married at First Sight Nashville covers days 9, 10, and 11 for the Married at First Sight couples. We get to see some of the couples take each other out to their homes, we get to see Pastor Cal visit the couples at their new apartment, and we get to see a buttload of unnecessary drama. Now if you haven't seen this episode yet, and you're wondering if you should or shouldn't, then I would highly recommend that you treat this episode like a bill collector and avoid it. If I had to compare this episode with anything, I would compare it to watching the Netflix movie Malcolm and Marie. I got a headache watching this episode, and I truly feel like I wasted my time. So with all that out the way, I want to talk about the couples, and first is Domynique and Mack. In this episode, Mack finally has a breaking point with Domynique, and he tells her that he doesn't like how judgmental she is, especially how he's given her nothing but grace and patience in return. Mack also loves his dogs, and he doesn't like how insensitive Domynique is about him. And I could definitely tell that after Mack got this off his chest, that whatever respect Domynique had for Mack left because she was clowning him for his feelings, and she wasn't a fan of how she deemed his energy to be negative. Now I'm pretty sure that a lot of stuff happened off camera that the audience didn't see, but the tension between the two of them was pretty thick for the majority of the episode. It was so bad that Domynique refused to move in with Mack, which was probably the best thing that they could have done at that point. But when Pastor Cal comes to check in on them, they pretty much battle over who could give the pettiest reason for why their marriage wouldn't work. I was proud of Pastor Cal for calling them out on their BS, and Domynique seemed to double down on why her feelings were valid and why Mack's weren't. Their scene ends with Domynique telling Pastor Cal that she's over the marriage, but she doesn't confirm that she wants a divorce. Well, surprise, surprise, most of us already know that Domynique and Mack divorced before the end of the season. And again, I think it's for the best. I think Domynique came on the show with really nothing to lose. I don't think that she's truly marriage-minded at this stage of her life, and I think she needs a few more years before she can be in a better position to get married. But with Domynique being one of the youngest cast members in Married at First Sight history, I think she stands a good chance of finding someone on the dating market in the future. I also think that Mack's DMs are going to blow up by the end of the season. Now we gotta move on to Clint and Gina, and yeah, their scenes gave me a headache when watching them. Now when Clint went to visit Gina, I will say that it was nice seeing Gina's dog Hank give Clint more action than Gina gave him over the past 9 days. But we see Pastor Cal going to visit Clint and Gina, and when Pastor Cal asks them what went wrong, Gina throws Clint under the bus, and she makes it seem like all of their issues are his fault. Clint says, "Hold up, wait a minute," and he accepts accountability for what he did, but he also tells Pastor Cal that Gina shares some blame as well. And this seems to be a reoccurring theme between Gina and Clint. Gina never thinks that she's wrong, and she will fight to the death to prove that her way of thinking is right. I was proud of Pastor Cal for calling out Gina, because it is pretty idiotic to think that time apart will help solve their marital issues. It's pretty clear that Gina wants to get a divorce. However, when Pastor Cal flat out asks Gina if she wants to proceed with the divorce, Gina says that she wants to remain together, but just not under the same roof. Pastor Cal then hits Gina with a heavy dose of undeniable logic, and Gina starts stuttering like a suspect on First 48. I was proud of Clint for trying to be mature about the situation, but I never had any hope for these two, and this episode only solidified my thoughts about them. Next, I gotta talk about Jasmine and Airris. In this episode, we see Jasmine take Airris over her home for a little show and tell, and Airris immediately spots all of Jasmine's beauty pageant crowns and Jasmine introduces her dogs to Airris. Now I'll admit, Jasmine's dogs were a little cute, but Airris looked like he wanted no parts with them, despite giving the dogs nothing but glowing compliments to Jasmine. Later on, Pastor Cal pays them a visit, and he tries to get to the bottom of where things went wrong between them. Airris goes on this little soliloquy about how hard it is mentally for him to be with Jasmine, and I'm glad that Pastor Cal was able to sift through the BS. Sister Jasmine essentially told Pastor Cal and Airris that she wanted the brother to desire her and rip her clothes off. And Airris is acting like Jasmine looks like Bigfoot. I wish I could say that I don't understand, but it's clear that Airris isn't feeling Jasmine, and I ultimately think that it's unfair to Jasmine to be in a marriage like this because Airris is going to waste her time for the next 6 weeks. I gotta talk about Kirsten and Shaq, but just like last week, their scenes for this episode are extremely limited. I'm guessing it's because they have so little in common that they must not be giving the producers anything to work with while creating their story for the show. But in this episode, we see Kirsten take Shaq to her home, and there were a ton of red flags. Domynique didn't have any decorations in her home, she didn't have any significant furnishings, and she didn't have a whole lot of clothes there. While Shaq was wondering if she just moved into the place, I was wondering if that's just an Airbnb, or if Kirsten asked one of her friends if she can move in for the show. Later on, we see Pastor Cal coming to give them a visit, and in my opinion, the visit was a huge waste of time. Kirsten tries to make Pastor Cal believe that she's having issues with Shaq because there's absolutely no chemistry between the two of them. I'm proud to see Shaq standing up for himself when facing somebody as manipulative as Kirsten had been, because throughout the scene, she was being dishonest with everybody about how she felt. I feel that Pastor Cal heard the both of them and sided with Shaq without being overly confrontational with Kirsten. But it's painfully clear that Kirsten is going to stay put so that she doesn't get fined for asking for a divorce early. I also think that free apartment that the show provides looks a whole lot better than the place Kirsten was currently staying. And lastly, we have Nicole and Chris. And just like with the past few episodes, I really don't have a lot to say about them for this episode. We finally get to see the dogs that Chris was crying about last episode, and one of Chris's dogs was humping everything in sight for half of the scenes. But Nicole didn't seem to be bothered by it, and when she was showing Chris her place, she seemed very positive about the situation. Later on, Nicole meets Chris at the park and all their dogs meet up. Let's just say the dogs weren't really feeling each other, but it was no Maya and Newton situation from last year. So it could have been worse. But Nicole tells Chris that since she won't be having her dog around, Chris needs to give Nicole some extra attention. And we all know that's code for Chris needing to give Nicole that good old pickle tickle. And I think Nicole is justified in expecting the meat from Chris. The question that remains is, when will Chris give Nicole consent to be freaky with him? Because he seems to be the only holdup at this point. But this marks the end of the video. If you have any comments about the episode or the review, feel free to leave them below in the comment section and I'll reply to everybody. Until next time, stay tuned and stay safe. Peace.